like the 911.
He's giving me the wrong title.
That works. Like, super into the talking.
That'll be one of the jokes. Yeah, that was a bit unfortunate. I thought she went.
All right. Recording? All right. I'll start a minute early just to embarrass the people that are going to show up in the next 40 seconds. Okay. I'm sorry I was out sick Monday, but you'll thank me for not bringing my germs anywhere near you. I made some adjustments to the calendar that I just want to point out really quickly. So, no class on Monday. Today, we'll do typography of user interfaces, and I want to do some, like, just a big bunch of stuff that sort of came up as I was looking at your projects and sort of seeing the repeated struggles of people. So we'll look at that today. I got rid of the reading for this week because we didn't actually talk anything about color, so I pushed that back to next week. So next week, we'll do color, and we'll also do material design. So I'll just kind of smush those two together. We'll look at color interaction. That's the biggest thing. Like, anybody can pick a random color and just have it be okay. But look at me, like, I pick a solid colored t-shirt every morning and it's perfect because it just goes with anything, right? But if you ask me to, like, pick out a shirt and a tie, like, first I'll protest, but then the combinations will be all wrong, right? So we'll look at a lot with color interaction. I'll show you some of my own sort of homebrew strategies for figuring out colors, and we'll look at dyads and triads and quadratic palettes and things like that. If there's time, we'll talk a little bit about CSS color models, both the RGB and HSL color space, but then also sort of some of the device and hardware level things that dictate how color is represented. If you are a very cautious and color sensitive user of Mac OS, if you pull open especially blues, this seems to be the case. If you pull open the same website, like I have my Gmail set up with a blue background, you have it pulled open in Safari, you have it pulled open in Chrome, even though it's the same website, ostensibly the same blue, the blue will look different in the Chrome version versus Safari. So we'll talk a little bit about why that happens and what things you can do to head off some of that stuff. So that gets more into like color profiles. So next week we'll read from the classic Joseph Alber's Interaction of Color. We'll also read all of the sections of Google's Material Design, and you'll keep reading in the Lupton book. You'll also be finishing your Project 1 next week, right? Because that's due March 1st. Let's look at the rest of the calendar. Because I did muck around with some things. All right. Week 8, so that'll be the last week of February. We'll do a whole week on motion. I'm going to preview a little bit of that today and talk about how we can do motion in CSS. And we'll talk more about the limited role of JavaScript. We'll talk that Wednesday about keeping motion accessible. There's a brand new CSS4 API that's coming online for doing reduced motion. It'll allow you to have like your fancy whiz-bang interface that does a lot of movement, but you'll have a way for people through their preferences, right? Like on your phones. Everybody remember this? When the new iOS came out that it finally caught up with Android, and it, you tilt the phone and all the icons and things seem to float above the surface of your background image. There's a way to limit that, right, for people with extraordinarily weak constitutions who throw up because their phone icons are moving around. But we can actually tap into that API, or we'll be able to in a standard way once CSS4 is out. Finish up type on screen, and then then the last thing, it was going to be material design and HCI guidelines next week, but I've moved HCI guidelines into our big week on accessibility, so we'll talk about that stuff. I think that's all the major changes for now. Your project is due March 1st. I managed to get through all of the, like most people when they're sick, they like rest. I just feel guilty. So, but the bonus was that I could go through and get all of your projects commented on. So if you have any questions about any of my feedback, just go ahead and keep adding to the thread where your project is. Any questions about where we're going, what we're doing, calendar-wise? Okay. So, I want to talk today about typography and form elements. So I've brought back this little newsletter thing, which is basically like a mini version of your Project 1. And I've done all of the niceties of using an ordered list. Again, some of you were using divs, some of you were using paragraph tags. Don't use those, particularly the paragraph tag. Again, paragraph tag is used for marking up paragraphs, not just whatever. Okay, so you can never go wrong with a good ordered or unordered list. So this has our email inputs, and I've also added a checkbox here because this is vexing lots of people, including Ore. All right, so I've tried to replicate here. So I wrote this ridiculous piece of copy. This is not an example of good copy. This is an example of a really long label, right? I am 18 years of age or older, and there is no denying that this is true, right? For all the 13-year-olds that are signing up for Yik Yak and stuff like that. So let's talk about these selectables, right? We have checkboxes, checked and unchecked. We have radio buttons, which are always in a group, and what's magical about them is that you can only select one of three things, right? It's the difference between how did you hear about us? Internet, TV, friend, right? Where you can select multiple checkboxes versus a radio button where you're forced between a few decisions. Now, as I remarked on a bunch of people's projects, these are poor choices to double up. If you have a true, false, or a yes, no question, right? Like we could do this like, I am 18 years of age or older. Yes, no. If you do that, you're adding that much more friction to somebody. They have to make a response. Whereas if we just make a statement that is either true or false, we can have one checkbox there, and if they can check it if it applies, and they can leave it blank if it doesn't apply. Okay. Same thing goes with radio buttons. Like we don't want to do a true or false here where we have yes, no. We might do this if we have a maybe, right? Or I don't know, something like that. But generally, we don't want to do these things. We want to do some statement of fact and allow somebody to check it if the statement is true, or if the answer is yes, or if they agree, and leave it unchecked otherwise, rather than doubling up. Because checkboxes are kind of ugly little things underneath the hood, right? We need to have some kind of name that goes with them, right? Here we've got age verification. I've put a value of 18, right? Give it a straight up number. So if I've got some script in the background that says if age is equal to over 18, I'm already getting that value from the form, right? Let's submit the form and see what happens here. And yes, I realize this looks like a train wreck. That's what for today is about. So you at it.com, I am 18 years of age, submit, right? So here's the string, at least in a GET request, that says there's our age verification variable, and it's set to some value, all right? Not age verification or something else. We've actually got some piece of data that's good here. So we can use our little if-else statement if somebody's 18 or not. All right, now one little trick to these things. Let me just double this up. All right, let's say we had one that was I don't know, we'll call this one age verification alcohol, right? And let's see, add my same ID to my for attribute here, age verification alcohol, then I will say I am 21 years of age or older. All right? Now, we would probably not do something like this where we would ask if somebody is 18 and if they're 21. Ooh, and that's great because now our checkbox is over here. But if I check both of these things, right, which makes sense. If you're 21, you are also automatically 18. Ooh, hold on a second. Okay, I did get that right. So if I hit submit on this, of course it's going to make a liar out of me. Okay, we're getting age verification twice here. That's not necessarily going to be the behavior in all browsers. So usually what we do, if we have checkboxes for different things, is we put in this shorthand array syntax like that, and it'll make it easier for us to grab that thing. Okay? It may work differently in post variables where we've got multiple things coming through. But now we've got that age verification, those brackets, it's much easier to programmatically go in and grab an array of all the values that they check. So when Matt has his "what fish are you interested in" thing, we can make sure that we get all of the fish and not just the last one that's checked. Okay, that's enough of that. So let's talk about some typography things with all of this. All right, so I've got my email, I've got my checkbox, and most of the time we're saying things like we want to have our labels be displayed as a block, right? So here's all my form normalization stuff, so I'm going to start building below all of this. All right, so I might say something like label display block, like that. Right? So I get what I want with my email input. Now this email attribute or this email label is on its own line. But of course, then the heartbreak comes when it comes time to deal with our little checkbox here. Okay? And note also that in the source order, I've flipped things around. Right? Usually we have the label followed by the input, but because of the way that checkboxes behave in the absence of any CSS, right? It usually makes more sense for in the source that checkbox to come before the label that marks it. Just so that you have checkbox, let me do it from your point of view, checkbox and then the statement of what it is that you're agreeing to, right? We could certainly keep this in check and do the label first, do the input, use CSS to move things around, but that may be confusing for people who are on some device that for whatever reason doesn't render our custom CSS. Okay, so we run into this little trouble here, which is what was happening to Ore if we got a nice long line of that. Okay, this is never going to work, right? Because we've got these things displayed as blocks. So what you might reasonably do is say something like label and input display as inline block, right? And you'll get something like this, right? Now we're getting more what we would expect with our checkbox. Our email thing is screwed up, assuming that we want the label on top. But as soon as our viewport collapses enough, see that inline block thing now is suddenly displaying as block, and we're losing the nice alignment with our checkbox there. So what we would probably do in that situation is go ahead and say that labels can be displayed as block, but then we'll write some CSS that looks for a type of checkbox, right? And then looks for a sibling label. And here we'll say display, not inline block. We want this thing to display purely as inline. Okay. Does everybody understand this selector? We're looking for input type checkbox and looking for a label element that's its immediate sibling. So it immediately comes after that. If you style your labels differently, you would probably also write different selectors here, but this keeps it displaying in line. So now we have our cake and eat it too. So my email label is up above my input, but my checkbox here, no matter how big or small this is going to line up with that checkbox there. Okay. That dinky, tiny little checkbox. All right, so first thing I'm going to do before I get anything else happening is I want to have these nice lines of my baseline grid show up properly for all of my input elements. All right, and the way I'll do that is to go into my input here, and And I'm going to just do a generic set of style for all of my inputs, which includes my submit button, includes a lot of other things. So I'm going to say border 0, right? Borders are, right, I was talking about this on some of your projects. You want to be careful about designs that start to do this, right? I call it Russian doll nesting, where you have some outer box, usually your browser viewport, right? You get a frame with every web page. We don't know how big or small it is or what orientation it's going to be, landscape or horizontal, but you get some kind of external box here, and then you have your form or whatever, and then we have some form element in it, and then we have the text that we're actually typing. So whether or not there is an explicit border around something or not, there are these blocks and regions, okay? The more of these things that there are, the more claustrophobic your design is. And if it feels claustrophobic, people are going to want to rush through it as soon as they possibly can, right? If you don't believe me, go home and get like a granola bar box or something and tape it to your face. And then walk around like this all day, right? It's very uncomfortable, okay? Don't do that with your form. So I'm going to say no border on this. I'm going to say, please, for your box sizing, I want you displaying as border box. I'm also going to go and get rid of the border radius that most inputs have, where they're going to do the little curves. I might want that, but for right now, all I'm worried about is getting everything lined up on my grid. Okay? All right, so we can't see it anymore because we got rid of the border and the border radius, but if I add a nice background color, do something hopefully that's dark enough to show up here. Okay, now I can see my boxes here. It's not, however, perfectly yet on my grid, right? We'd expect to see that line. If I do this, if I say label, color yellow, right? That's lining up pretty perfectly with my grid lines here. So there's still something wrong with this box, that it's fallen off the grid line. And I might, because I'm a person who believes in nice open interfaces for people to enter information, I might start adding some padding to this thing. All right, recall that for this design, I've got a 26 pixel baseline grid. I'm going to do straight up 26 pixels. I won't convert that to ems just yet. Okay, now I've got this nice open box where I can type. Okay, so it's nice and open, and we can go a little bit further with this thing. Let's go ahead and say we want, at our mobile scale, let's do, and let me put this up. I always like to do box sizing and dimension things closer to the top. So we can say width 100% on this. Put my padding up here too. Okay. Remember, because of border box, we can get away with this. Without border box, we would have a input that is 100% plus 26 pixels. No, plus 52 pixels one wide, right? Because we're adding that 26 on all sides. Okay. And since it's distracting at this point, let's get rid of this yellow background on the label. Okay. Now, I'm using Eric Speakerman's typeface FF Meta on these things, but you'll notice that me at whatever.not, that is not my typeface that I've carefully chosen for my users. So I want to also go in here and make sure that I'm using the same typeface on my inputs. So below all these things, I'm going to do font family inherit, font size inherit, and line height inherit. Okay, just a stack of those things so that I'm explicitly saying inherit the parent of this thing. So we should get a typographic setting that matches the rest of our page. And there we go. Okay, this is starting to look better all the time. And if we look on here, this is lining up perfectly with our baseline grid at this point. which is a very happy place. Unfortunately, you can never go by just one browser. So if I pull open my phone, the cute dog, see there's that motion thing right there.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Can I check your mic?
You can certainly check
think
my
it's
mic.
off.
It's off.
Yeah. But we can still hear you from the.
You can from the room mic?
Yeah, from the
Okay.
When you do your phone like that, how do you do that? You go to QuickTime Player and then what?
You go to QuickTime Player and then you go to new screen recording. And then you, in the little drop-down menu there. It's fine now? Okay. All right. Thank you for coming to check that. Okay. So, yeah, so you're able to select from this little thing what camera you want to use, and then you choose, I don't know if you can see that, it's microscopic here, but we can choose my iPhone as the source of that thing. Okay? And I don't actually hit record in class, because that would be a really boring movie, but it's enough that I can get a live preview. So if I reload this thing with my new designs in place, give IIT's network some time to think about what it wants to do. There we go. You see what's happening here? For some reason, on iOS, there's still some little bleed over here. Most people wouldn't care because most people aren't as crazy as I am about these kinds of things. But the one surefire way I know to make this thing conform to our baseline grid, right? Look, the submit button is also off by this mound. What you can do when you are very, very careful, remember I've always said never set height on anything. Here comes an exception. Because we know we've got 26 pixels of padding, let's draw this thing out. So here's my big, generously spaced input box. 3 baseline grids. Here's my line of actual input that's coming in here. I know I've got a 26 pixel line height. How do I know that? Because I said inherit the line height on this page. Okay, so we've got 26 there, and then I've said 26 pixels of padding all around. That's 26 on the top and bottom. You add all of this stuff up, right? 26 times 3. That gives us 78. So now I can say, and here I'm going to probably do this, well, I'll do it everywhere. We'll regret it later, but just to get started, I'm going to say height, 78 pixels. Okay? This is a case where we would definitely want to change this to M's before we ship it. Because if somebody starts, in fact, I'll try to demonstrate that. We'll see if that actually works. But if somebody does have a larger or smaller typeface, this will look all out of whack. So this really needs to become an M value. But if I say height, 78 pixels, if I reload this thing, it looks like it's going to be OK. Let me reload the one up here. Something really interesting happened. What's that? Oh, you can't tap on the thing. I got to tap it here. Boom! Massive checkbox. What a great little side effect, right? Something's still not right here with my submit button. I got to figure out why this is not right. But now, at least on iPhone, I do have pixel perfect perfection with my baseline grid. I also learned something interesting about this horrible, horrible little checkbox thing. How many of you tried to resize the checkbox? Nobody, right? Why would you invite that kind of pain into your life, all right? But it turns out that we can modify how big this checkbox is based on the height, right? We changed the width, nothing changed about that text box, but when we started setting a height, we got better control over what that checkbox was doing. So let's see if we can tweak this and make it look a little bit better. This is no good, right? And this is also very sad because look how it's blown this thing up so that it's all pixelated, right? That's not just the zoom effect. That's actual poor artwork that's rendering here. Okay, so let's see what we can do to get this fixed. Okay, now with all of these baselines in place, let me start tackling input type equals checkbox. All right. First thing I'm going to say with checkbox, I don't need it to be 100% wide. That's what's causing that centering effect to happen here, I'm guessing. So if I just change width back to auto, okay? Why auto? Because I'm doing a more specific version of the checkbox input here, right? This is all inputs everywhere. This is inputs that are just of type checkbox. So I've set width to auto here. Let's see what happens if I reload this. Oh, that baseline lookup is killing me. Okay. Wow, that's really great. That's not what I expected to happen at all. Width auto sets it back. Huh. Well, we'll keep working with it. All right. And now I'm going to say float left. And I get some interesting effects there. Does everybody see this? When I've set a height on this element, and I've got a width, or I've got a height on this element, right? It's still holding 78 pixels for this checkbox. So we might actually say height. Let's make that also auto. Okay. So now we're kind of back to where we were before. Let's see what's happening on iOS, just as one other indicator. Okay? All right. That's looking more like what we might expect of this checkbox. Hard to toggle, but the main point, if I can go back to what my main point is, which is I'm trying to set all this stuff on a baseline grid, right? We're now lined up back on the baseline grid. We don't have an oversized checkbox, which we might want eventually, although if we get to it, I'll show you a completely different and better method to handle that. But now we're back on the baseline grid, including for our giant submit button here. All right? What should a button read? Should it read submit? What is the best possible label for any form anywhere? What do we hear? Let's write up some words here. Because what is submit referring to? What is being submitted when you click a submit button? The form, right? Submit makes sense as a label if you're the kind of person who knows about HTML forms. If you're my 95-year-old fictitious Aunt Martha, you don't know what a form is. You just know what your email address is and that you want to sign up for these breaking alerts or whatever. So what are some other words that we can use for these submit buttons? Say it louder. Sign up. Confirm. Register. I'm liking more of these as we go. Join. Save. Maybe if it's something that we're saving, right? We usually think of save in a file context. How about a fancy one like subscribe? Right? If you're signing up for a newsletter, we could say subscribe. Most people understand what that means, right? The key thing, whatever you choose for your buttons for submitting a form, is they should be a verb. And they should be a verb that very distinctly describes what someone is doing, right? They're subscribing, or they're joining, or they're enrolling, or whatever it is, right? So it should be a human verb, not a machine verb, right? Submit is a machine verb. No human is submitting, right? A form is submitting, okay? So why don't we change that as well? Just so that we're working with the actual text that we expect on our form rather than submit. So we can just say subscribe. All right. All right. So this is looking better because now we've got all of our text set on a nice baseline grid. We can debate about the full width of that subscribe button. We can also debate about having the text be centered as it is by default. All right. But I'm mostly concerned about having all of my type on the lines that I expect. So I'm going to start adding some space in to make this thing breathe. Okay? So I'm going to probably say H1 and P, since they're both the same size. Padding bottom, just copy and paste here my 1.182, not the line height part, but the value, okay? All right, made this breathe a little bit better. I might even add to my HTML tag padding, right? Not a perfect design, but it's enough that I can start looking at what I'm doing. Okay, we've now got some space between the edge of the viewport and what's happening up here. All right, and let's see, why not? How should we split these three things up? How do you want to space them out so that they're related but not smushed together like this? Where should the space go? Okay, under the checkbox part. Well, so we definitely would want to move our subscribe button down. Okay. Do we want a line of space between email and our input? TK, that was a good answer. Don't cover your mouth. What did you say? Said no. Why are you saying no? Let's demonstrate why no. Right? Let's put padding bottom on our label. Why is that a pretty weak choice?
It looks disconnected, so they don't look like, you know what I mean? It's like super far
Right.
away.
Especially if we're talking about a form before somebody's actually entered any data into it, and if we're not going to use the placeholder, right? That's just too dang far away. All right. And notice down here, why am I not getting a line of space after this? That's a label, isn't it? Why no line of space? And why is it next to the checkbox? We said that most labels should display as black, but we said a label that immediately follows a checkbox element, that should be displayed in line. When something is displayed in line, you can't do any boxy things with it. You can't say how tall it is. You can't say how wide it is. You can't say how much top and bottom padding it has. Okay? So it's getting the bottom padding, but because it's displayed as inline, it does not behave that way. All right? So, but we're barking up the wrong tree here anyway, so let's see what happens if we go back to the way things were. Okay? Now we've got our email sitting on top of this huge input box. Okay? We might start saying things like input type, since we've got only the one or two elements here for email. We could say padding bottom. Oh, we wouldn't want to do that. Right? If I start adding more padding to this, what am I going to do? Probably nothing, because we've already added some padding to this. That's how we've gotten this nice large thing. So we need some space below it. Okay? At this point, though, let's remember that we have some really pretty HTML syntax that we can deal with. We've got all of our label groupings inside these nice list items. So now we can use that to our advantage. We can say, and here I'm going to put these, where have I been writing? Oh, where'd all my other stuff go? Must have been sloppy deleting. So here we go. Not base styles. Right, now that I'm moving beyond basic things, I'm going to say form, and every time you encounter a list item there, let's have padding. Actually, I could just paste it. Nope, I can't. If I go one back, nope. There we go. Okay, padding bottom on the list item for each of these things. Boom. Okay. So rather than trying to style those form elements directly, now we're thinking about the modules, that is the larger pieces of content that contain these different things, and we're using that to separate this stuff out. This is looking pretty good. Okay? That submit button is probably, or subscribe button is probably way too big, but at least we've gotten some extra mileage out of these other things. All right? Now, here's what I'm thinking. We could do this in the placeholder attribute, right? But it is the year 2017, and people generally know what an email address looks like, as much as they laugh at your clever little jokes at me@don'tspamme.com or whatever. So here's what I want to do. This is a fine typographic setting for this interface in the absence of JavaScript. But if I have JavaScript available to me, what I want to have happen is have that email label displaying over the top of the input box. Okay, so rather than taking up that extra line of precious vertical space on its own, email is going to be right there where my cursor is blinking. The second that I activate my form element, I'm going to move email up. Okay, so we'll do a little bit of animation. All right, so let's look at how we would do this. All right. First thing is I need some more guidance in my style sheet. I want my state styles. And this should say modular. State styles. And you'll recall that my default JavaScript that I always use with jQuery takes away that Node.js class and adds a class of has.js. This is essential because I don't want to start moving the label around only to have JavaScript pull it out of the way if somebody doesn't have JavaScript. If they've got CSS, then that email will just sit there no matter what happens. I'll try to demonstrate that for you. Okay? So I'm going to say, when you have JavaScript and you have a input list item of input email, because I think this is the only place I'm going to do this, and you have a, well, no, we'll style this first. We will say position relative. Okay, do we remember the three different primary kinds of positioning in CSS? I bring this up because I know people are struggling with layouts, and of course one of the old school ways to handle layouts is to use positioning. What are our three types? By default, everything on the page, right? Everything you see here, before I reload it with that position relative, how is everything positioned by default? Static, thank you. And all position static means is just run it wherever it happens to be in the HTML source. Okay? What are the, there's a position fixed, but let's not talk about it. What are the other two that we use? Relative. And what's relative's evil twin? Yes, absolute. Which, despite how the vodka is spelled, takes an E at the end. Okay? What happens when we position something absolutely in terms of the rest of the content on your page? How does it behave? All right.
It's as if it's not there.
That's right. When we position something absolutely, everything else will come flying up over top of it. Weird things tend to happen. What about if we position something relatively? Okay. It will leave a hole wherever it used to be. So if I say position relative on this box and I do nothing else and reload the page, it looks like nothing has changed at all. If I say position relative and I say top 5 pixels, okay, it moves this thing down by 5 pixels and it leaves a hole behind, so everything behaves it was there. Let me do something a little bit more than that, a little more exaggerated. 150 pixels. Okay. Now it's moved it down 150 pixels, but there is a hole where it would have been displayed otherwise. Okay. That's why we usually only use position relative to set a positioning context for other things. In this case, I'm going to say has.js input email label. And I'm going to position this thing absolutely. Okay? And this is one of those cases where we would use absolute position. Yes, there's Flexbox. Yes, there's CSS Grid and all these other fancy things. But this really is the tool for the job here. So if I just do that, okay, all I've done here now is position relative on that whole list item area and position absolute on my email. So what happened? Because email is positioned absolutely, that label, everything below it jumps up, which in this case is perfect because, look, it's sitting on the baseline grid. That's awesome. Okay? And of course, now we've got this, right, where this is a little bit close. So what I want to do is I would like to have this email showing up right on the same baseline grid as where you would begin typing email. So I need to use a top value here. And how far down from the top do I need to push that to get it on the same line? Yeah, 26 pixels, right? That's our grid line. So let's drop this. 26 pixels. Okay. Okay. So that's why we're using JavaScript detection here, because of course now we've got this palimpsest here, where we've got two different kinds of text running over the top of each other. What I want to have happen, whoops, is when I activate this column, I want email to go shooting up to the top. All right? And so how will we do that? Little bit of jQuery. We'll say when our email input is focused, right? That means somebody has tapped it with their finger, or they've tabbed to it on their keyboard, or they've clicked it with a mouse. When it's in focus, we want to change up something about that label tag. Okay, so let's go back and double check our HTML. What's our ID for our input for email? Oh, look, principle of least surprise. It's called email, right? Again, I know you think I'm crazy because I'm like, don't call it that. Don't use, input or some weird, positional kind of thing. We just say, this input for your email is called email. Because then, when you're writing JavaScript, we could just say this. There's no ambiguity there. What element are we listening for to have focus? The email input, right? That's why we don't use things like center and right and top and purple and blue and thing and whatever, right? We want to make code that relies on that elsewhere just as readable. So if you're choosing nice, readable class and ID names, you make your life a lot easier. Okay? So now we need to find a function, not a function. We need to find an element here in our HTML. All right, so we've got this for email. We've got this ID input email. So I'm actually going to refer to that. May not be the most efficient, but we're only doing it once, so I think we'll be able to get away with it. So we use another jQuery selector in here. So we're saying when focus comes to the email element, let's go find ID input email label. And we're going to add a class to it of active. Okay, that's a good general all-purpose class. In a bigger project, I might choose something finer grained, but in this case, active will suit it. Okay. All right, so let's do really basic stuff. So in my CSS, I'm going to repeat this selector, but now I'm going to add that active class to my label, and I'm going to, just for now, I'm going to say top 0 pixels. Okay, does everybody see what's supposed to happen? By default, when the page loads, JavaScript is active, we're going to push that label down 26 pixels. All right, and when the email input is focused, we're going to add this active class to the label, and then we're going to set that top to being 0. So let's see what happens when we actually reload this page and try that. Okay, so there's my email sitting where I want it to, and now when I activate it there, it jumps up. Okay, I'm not thrilled about where it's jumping up. I think it's actually probably a little bit too low. Okay. So let's try something a little bit different here. In fact, in some ways, I kind of wouldn't mind if it showed up there. What if I put it right on the border? Would it? That looks kind of jangy. But if we did something a little bit different, well, for right now, let's worry about the animation. I promised an animation. We've been looking at static web pages since August, so let's see something animate here. Okay? There is a CSS3 property called transition. And transition takes, at minimum, 2 values. It takes some other CSS property name that you want to transition, and then it takes a time, specified a few different ways into how long you want that to take. So I'm going to say transition the top value, right? Because that's what's changing here, top 26 to top minus 13. And just so everybody sees it, let's take it a whole second. Okay. All right, so one more time with feeling. Let's reload this page. Watch closely. I'm going to activate. And the email slides up like that. Okay? Yeah. Not going to win you any awards, but that's pretty cool for what it portends, right? Because what's awesome about this is we're not using jQuery to move this thing around. We could do that, but what would happen is that you would be at the mercy of the event loop of whatever JavaScript engine somebody's running to basically redraw that thing for a period of a second. It's resource intensive. It's going to be shaky and jangy, whereas if we do it at the CSS level, we're using WebGL or whatever graphics level processing is available to us here to do these kinds of things. All right? And of course, if we move away, now we've got this going on, and we would have to do some very careful work with this. We could choose to do something like this, right? That's on focus. I'm going to do this longhand. There's much better ways to do this, but just real quickly so everybody can see what's going on. We can say on blur, remove class, active. This will be an important lesson about where to put the transition property. So I'm focused, I'm blurred. Oh, that actually works out okay. Things have changed since the old days of CSS3. Used to, what you had to do was to make sure you had your transition. Oh no, I did it in the right place. We could have also, if I put it down here, like this is what I was thinking. Okay, if we put it down here, okay, so I'll get my nice transition this way, but when I go blur, yeah, then it clicks back. Okay, does everybody see that? And then boink. So what we usually want to do is we specify our transitions on the most generic form of the element, okay, without the class, so that anything else that we transition to is going to respond in kind. Okay? All right, boom. Now the question is, somebody changes their mind, then we've got this little ugly thing happening here. So what might we do? How would we improve this? We don't want this behavior where the label goes back down over the top of somebody's email address. How can we programmatically account for that? Yes?
Once you see the pattern of the email, then negate the effect of the email.
Yeah, absolutely. Or even more simply than that, just in case someone forgets their email and they need to look it up. We could just do something like this. If email value, and I think we can do a length property on here, is greater than 0. Oh, no, because we're checking to see if it's empty. If it's equal to 0, let's see what happens. This is probably going to be broken. Wouldn't be the first time. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to check email, look for its value, and see if its length is 0. Okay, it looks like we broke everything with that, which is great. Oh, that's because we're looking for an email selector, not ID email, although I don't think that should be breaking anything like it did on blur function. Ah, don't have enough parentheses there. There we go. And we need a dollar sign. There we go. Okay, I fixed it. We don't have a fix for the problem of when. Okay, apparently I'm not fixed what I thought I was fixing. Okay. Let's look at our old console and figure out what I've got wrong here. Good, type area. Length is not a function. Okay. Might have to fall back on the JavaScript. Okay, yeah, that means something different. Yeah, here rather than calling, because what that's going to do in that chain is call length, right? Because I believe we can get the length of a string in JavaScript with a length attribute. Var my length is equal to hi there. If we do my length dot length 8. Let's just try dropping these. No, I bumped it all out. Ways I did not intend. Here we go. Oop, wrong page. There we go. Okay, now I've got it working again. Okay, so just mistyped that property when I should have left the braces off because it's a property, not a method. Okay, so let's test it. Test. Okay. All right. It's freaking out about something there, but that's okay. Main thing is it's not dropping that back down if we've got any input there. But if this is blank, then it goes back to doing what it's been doing all along. Okay. Okay. Let's talk about this checkbox. These are pain in the necks to style. But they are what keeps our form accessible. But what I would like to be able to do is bring my own checkboxes to the game. Okay? What we will do here is we're going to quietly hide that ugly system checkbox. We're going to hide it from view. We're not going to pull it out because we still need that thing to be selected. But just to demonstrate here what we can do with that checkbox, whether we can see it or not, let me add one little piece of nonsense jQuery here. I'm going to say, when someone clicks on heading 1, I want to check the checkbox. I'm going to say ID, what was that, age verification? Yeah, ID age verification. Okay, so what I'm saying here is if somebody clicks on heading 1, I want to check that verification box. Okay, this is a nonsense thing just to demonstrate that we can listen for an event on some other element and we can have it behave as we want it to on some other element. So if I reload the page, if I click on get our newsletter, nothing happens. What did I do wrong? Age verification, property checked. Heading 1 on click. That should work. But it's not. Okay, time to check the documentation. jQuery prop. All right, ordinarily we would use the attribute method, but for some historical reasons, okay, so we can do prop checked. Is that not what I'm doing?
Those are double quotes.
The double quotes shouldn't matter. We're looking for age verification, and we're checking we're setting that. On click. No spelling mistakes, right? Function, age verification. Just for the sheer, let's get rid of this query string on here. That's obnoxious. There's something simple that I'm missing here. ID age verification property check. This is basic stuff. And I grabbed the ID right from here, so there's nothing wrong with that. Boop. All right, here's where we start just picking it apart. Console log. H1 clicked. Right? Sanity checks. Figure out where this is breaking down. Yeah, see, it's clicking. So why is my function not being executed the way I expect it to be? ID age verification. There's no good reason. Let's do the cargo cult programming method and we'll add the double quotes, but that honestly should not have any effect. Now we're not getting anything. Because I'm not even registering click events over here like I should be. Oh, that's because I got rid of them. That is not. Unless it doesn't like. Now I'm thinking Ruby is scrambling up in my brain, but let's see if there's an issue with that minus sign in the single quotes. Or what JavaScript might be reading as a minus sign. No, that didn't happen either. jQuery, ruining my day. Oh, do we have to pass in true? I'll bet we do. This is probably just returning true or false. True. Okay, one more time with feeling. Yay, now it's clicked. Okay. All right. The whole point of that ridiculously long diversion was to say that we can click on something or we can activate something else and control form elements at a distance. Okay? So if we can do that, that means that we can programmatically check our checkbox however we'd like. Now I want to change how this is actually being displayed. And I'm going to do that with using an icon font, which some of you have started to explore using. So I figured, let's do this. So there's a bunch of different ways you can go. I use a site called Fontello when I do this. And what I like about Fontello, like you can get Font Awesome or any of these other different kind of icon sets, but usually you download those things whole cloth and you get every single icon that's part of the set. because these are resources like anything else, I want to just select the icons that I actually want. Okay, so if I'm looking here, there's some nice things, right? Like there's a little checkbox box, there's a little X, some little pop-out things, right? And then we'd have to start looking to see, right? That's rounded, that's not the same thing. This is always how I kind of measure an icon set, is whether or not I can get like the negative version, right? Like here's the box with the check, but what if I just want the box, no check in it, so that I can have the illusion of a box being checked. Here's all our social icons. Do anything towards the bottom? Nope. All right, so let's keep looking for one that has an actual empty box and a check box next to it. I think if we go down a little further here, we'll have better luck. Although we could always create our own fake box, I suppose. Might actually be the better way to go. MFG Labs. And of course, these are all openly licensed icon fonts, which is why we can just do this shopping cart method and grab what we want. Elusive. That sounds good. I like elusive. Line icons. Web symbols. I like that less. Nice, just empty circle on this one. That would make life easier. Well, tell you what, let's just make our own checkbox. So I'm going to grab one sad little single icon, which is just a check mark by itself. All right, I'm going to use this for my own custom checkbox. So I'm going to do download web font for this one single little icon here. All right, yes, you can save it. All right, and let's go move downloads. Let's see, .zip, what was it called? Fontello. Let's put that here. All right, and then I'm going to just unzip Fontello into my CSS directory. Can I not use a target with unzip? This is what happens when you use Git too much. You forget your old school commands like unzip. All right, fine. Have it your way. Move into CSS. Unzip Fontello. Okay. All right. So now with this Fontello package that I've got a whole bunch of different resources here. Okay. This is why I was hoping to avoid this situation, but we can hang on to the file as it existed. What I need are my font files here. EOT, SVG, TTF, WOOF, and WOOF2. All right, those are the files that actually contain my sad little check mark. Okay, and then I can look at their demo CSS here to know what I need to do to actually use these fonts. So I'm going to just, let's do a couple of commit here's. First I'm going to do git add Fontello added sad little Fontello packaged checkbox. Okay. All right, and now let's actually, I'm going to get rid of the zip file because I don't really need that. Okay. I'll have to go back and do all of these commits when I get home tonight since this is a mess. All right, and I'm going to go inside of this Fontello directory. Okay. And I'm going to move this font up a directory. Let's see, move that. Git, move, no. Git, no, I'm not going to do git at all. Copy recursively the entire font directory up a level. So I've got that right off of my CSS directory. And let's also copy this Fontello. I'll add it to my file so we don't have to make multiple requests. So let's look at this. Okay, so what is this doing? This is what fonts.com and other Typekit do for us, which is to set up this font face syntax for us. Okay, so the way that works behind the scenes is we use this @fontface keyword, and then we specify what the name of it is going to be. In this case, just Fontello. All right. Then we give it a whole bunch of different sources so that different browsers that support different kinds of typefaces can access the one that makes most sense for them or that they actually understand. We're setting the font weight and style to normal, which is to be expected with this particular icon font. Okay. Now, it's giving us some attribute selectors, and it's going to look for any class that begins with icon hyphen, and then it's going to add this before pseudo element, right? Or pseudo class, excuse me. And it's going to set it to be Fontello. It's going to do those normal things. All right. Do some things with variants and all of that. And finally, down here, we have this icon OK. And icon OK is going to say, before you encounter this class, set the content equal to this little Unicode registry here, which is going to be our checkbox. So if I just test this thing, let me grab all of this. I'm going to put it in my screen.css file. I'm going to just put a separate Fontello section here at the bottom. I would probably clean a lot of this stuff up. Okay, and let's see, where is it looking for things? .font. That's not correct. My CSS file is going to look for a font directory, so I need to go. Let's just do a quick replace. Find .font and just change it to font. There we go. All right, icon OK. Let's just test this thing on our header. Because that worked out so well before testing something on the header. Let's try it again. Okay. Class. Icon OK. All right. Let's see what all breaks here. Okay. Not found. What was it looking for? Oh, okay. Okay. We need our path to include our CSS directory. Boink. One more time. Control F. Find font slash. Change it to CSS font slash. Still didn't like it. It's looking for CSS, font, Fontello. Did not like how I was doing that. Let's see. Let's look at our actual HTTP server and look at the errors. Okay, it was looking for CSS, font, Fontello. There. Did I not move that stuff there? I did not. Oh my God, see, this is what happens when you have like multiple things named the same thing. It is the road to hell. So let's correct that. Okay. All right, so I want to copy recursively Fontello blah fonts to my CSS directory here. Oh. And now we actually need to put them into, all right, move. This is just exploding. Make directory, font. This is going to be like the most borked thing in the history of the world. Fontello.star into font. Okay, now that's all squared away. Let's try it one more time. Yay, there's our checkbox. Or our check at least, right? Up to next to get our newsletter. So what I would do is first get rid of this icon OK on my heading 1. Oh my God, this is going to be so easy. Icon OK is our class, Rosa. So in our JavaScript now, all we have to do is listen for, let's see, what's that input? We have an input age verification. So we're going to almost do the same thing as above. We're going to listen for, stop. Listen for a click on a label inside of there. On click. And here we go again with another anonymous function. All right, we're going to say this add class icon OK, right, which we got from Fontella. We could, of course, write our own class, but for the sake of the few remaining minutes we have. So we're going to just add to this label this icon OK class. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to say, got too much stuff here. Okay. In our state styles, we're going to say if you have JavaScript, find ID age verification, which is our actual input element, and we're going to do our old-fashioned position absolute, right, which makes it behave as though it no longer exists anymore. And then we'll do our left position way out over the Pacific Ocean someplace. Okay? Okay, so if I reload this, all right, this isn't going to quite work. But if I click this, okay, it's broken, but something did happen here. Why is that not loading now? Hitting 404 errors again. Boo. Right? We should be seeing not this little ugly box there, but we should see our little checkbox. Okay. Again, use your... Okay, it's doubling up on this CSS directory twice. Why is that happening? Okay, so I think I was correct in the first place where we don't need that CSS directory. Let's try this one more time. Good Lord. How many times can I rewrite a path in one class? No. There we go. There's our checkbox. Okay, or our custom check. And of course, we wouldn't want to do that where we would click and then it gets inserted like that. We would probably do something like change up how this icon displays. We could do something like just adding to our own selector here. We could say position absolute. Okay. If we do that, all right, now we've got the checkbox there, which looks ugly, but if we work a little bit harder, we can use our CSS on that label. See, has JS age verification, has JS age verification label, plus label. We can do something like margin left 52 pixels, which is probably too much, but let's see what happens. No. Okay, so I'm adding some display block here because now that this is not having to obey the whims of the checkbox anymore, that's still off. Left. Oh, that's because wrong input. Here we go. Label, position absolute, left, minus 26 pixels. I'll clean all this stuff up in GitHub when I push all the commits tonight. There we go. Still not what I want, but at least now we've got a custom checkbox that's showing up over there and our text like that, okay? And of course we would want to do further, which is what I will also do. Let's make our own little fake black box for this thing to eventually appear in, right? Because that's what people are used to. Or a little box with a border around it, over which we'll just overlay this nice checkbox when we're done. I'll finish it up and push you the commit. You'll be happier than you are right now, because you all look like you're absolutely miserably like, God, why couldn't he have stayed sick and stayed home? All right, I will see you on Monday.